Hey guys, in this video, we're going to create a sign-in page like the one you see on your screen. So for this sign-in page, I also have its dark version. So this is the dark version for this same sign-in page. In this video, I'm going to show you how I've created this sign-in page. So if that sounds great, let's get started. So now I'm in my VS Code. The first thing we are going to do is to create a section. This section is going to have the following classes. So I've given it a py of 36, I've given it a flex, and then the items, I've given it an item center to align items at the center. I also want it to have a gradient background like the one you saw at the beginning. So I'm giving it a linear gradient. So for the gradient, it will start from green 100 to green 50, which is a light shade of green. And then I'll give it an opacity of 90, and then I'll give this screen an edge screen, which is 100 VH. For the dark mode, the gradient will start from slate 900 to slate 800. I'm going to create another div inside here, and we'll give it the following classes. A class of container, and then I will give it an MX auto to kind of center this div, and then I'll give it a PX of 4, which is giving it 16 pixels from the left and also from the right, and then I'll give it a relative class. But for now, let's remove this relative class. After doing that, I will create another div inside here, and for this div we'll give it the following classes. I will give this a max width of 400 pixels. I will give this a max width of 400 pixels and M auto just to center this div at the center of the page, and then I'll give it a BG white. On dark modes, I'll give it a BG slate 950. I'll give it a shadow of MD, and then on dark modes, the shadow should change to gray 800. I also make this container div a rounded, I'll give it a rounded MD. After I've done that, I'll save this, and then we are going to continue. Inside this div with 400 pixels, I will start creating the content of our form. So the first thing that we're going to have is the heading. For the heading, I will give it a margin Y of 6, which is giving it 24 pixels top and bottom. I also give it a text of Excel, which creates a font size of 20 pixels. I'll give it a font semi-bold, which gives it a font weight of 600, and then text black. For the dark version, I'll give it a text white. After I've done that, I will come here and create a form. Inside the form, I will give it the following elements, but let's just look at what we want to achieve. So first of all, we want to have a username, and then this input box, and then a password, this input box, this remember me section with this checkbox, and then the forgot password text, and then a submit button. After this, we have this text, and then a sign up a tag that can take the person to the sign up page. So let's first of all see what we've done this far, and then we can continue. So I am using Live Server, so I'll just say open with Live Server to open what we have at the moment. So this is what we have at the moment. Let's continue. Inside this form, what I want to do is to create our first div section. So this div section will contain the label, and then it also contains the input field. So this is our input field that we're talking about, this label and this input field. So if I go back, you see that we've given it a class of text black. For the dark version, we have given it a text white. And then I've given it the name username because it's for our username. And then I'll create an input down here. But you can see this label has the for username, and this is the same ID that we have here, just to indicate that this label is for this input. For this input, what I've done is to give it a W full, a margin top of 3, which gives it 12 pixels, a padding Y of 2, which gives it 8 pixels top and bottom, a padding X of 3, which gives it 12 pixels on the left and right side. I'll give it a height of 10 and then a BG of transparent. For the dark version, I'll give it a BG slate of 900, and then I'll give it a text slate 200 for the same dark version. I also give it rounded, so it has rounded corners, outline none, so it has no outline. I'll give it a border. For the border, I want to give it a border gray 200, and then when I focus on this input, I also want to give it a border green 600. For the dark version, I'll give it a border gray of 800. After that, I'll give it a focus for the same dark version. For the focus, I'll give it a border green of 600. And then for the focus, I want it to have no ring, so I'll give it a ring 0. So basically, this is the styling for our input. It'll be the same styling for the second input. So I'll just save this and let's check what happens. If I go here, and then you can see that we have this input. But now you can see it shows the dark version. For now, what we want to do is to remove this dark class, so we have the white version of the same input. I will go back, and if you can see here, inside the form where we created our first div, we've given it a margin bottom of 4. Down here, I want to create another div section. So for this div section, we'll have the password and the input for the password. So let's do that. So for the input of the password, what I've done is I've also given it a margin bottom of 4 just to create another margin for the next element. But you can see I've also given it 4, and then it's login password, and then here let's give it an ID. This just gives an indication that this label is for this specific input. I'll give it a login password there. But now you can see I've also given the text black, and for the dark version I've given it the text white. So it's the same thing. The only difference is now I've given this type password. This is because if I save this and I go back here and I type, you can see that it gives me specific things that a password input requires. And this, since it's text, it gives me what a text input requires. So that is very important. So I'll just go again through the classes, even though they are the same classes that we've used in this form or in this section where we have the text element. So we've given it a margin top of 3, which is 12 pixels, a W full so that it fills the whole container, and then a PX so it has a padding of 12 pixels. We have also given the BG transparent, and then for the dark modes we've given it a BG slate 900. For the text, it's text slate 200, and then I've given it rounded corners, outline none, so it doesn't have any outlines. For the border, we're giving it a border gray of 200, and then focus, for the focus we have given it a border green of 600. For the dark version again, we have given it a border gray of 800, and then once we focus on the same dark version, we're giving it a border green 600. And then on focus again, we're giving it a ring 0, so it doesn't have any ring. Once you've saved this, it will reflect. We've already seen what it looks like. So I'll just go ahead and then create the next section, which is the remember me section and the forgot password section. I will again come at the bottom of this. I'll create another div. For this div, I'm giving it a flex, and the reason is I want the text to align side by side. So I'll give it a flex and then justify between, so that it creates space between the two elements or the elements. So I also give it a margin bottom of 4. After doing that, inside here, I'll give it a flex, and then I'll say item center. Now what we're doing is we are starting this section where we have these two. So for that, we are saying let's have this input, and then it's a checkbox, so it will be, I'll give it a rounded corners, and then I'll give it a border of gray 200, and then for the dark modes, I'll give it a border of gray 800. I'll give it a text green 600. When I focus on it, I want the border to be purple 300, and then when I focus, I want the link to have an offset of 0, and then on the same focus, I want the link to change to purple 200, and then I want the ring, when we focus on it, the link to have an opacity of 50, and then I have a margin right of 2, which is 8 pixels. So that margin right, basically it's from here to here. And then the next thing here that is very important is to indicate that this is a checkbox, because if you don't indicate, then like the styles, much of the styles that comes with Tailwind CSS will not apply. So this is very important. After I've done that, I will come here and then create a label, and for the label, I'll give it a text slate 400, and then I'll give it a text of remember me. Now that is for the first section. For the second section, I will give it now if I do this, you can see that this flex has two elements. The first element is the div, and then the second element is the p tag. So we are saying it should have a space in between, and then I'll give the p tag a text slate of 400, and then a margin bottom of 0, and then I'll give it inside it, I'll create an a tag. I'll give it an href, so it indicates where it takes the person. For the text, I'll give it a text slate of 400, and then I'll add this text. If the person has forgotten his password or their password, then they can click this link to take them to a place where they can reset their password. So let's save this and see the changes. Now you see we have this section, the remember me and forgot password part. The last thing, or almost the last thing that we're going to do, is to create this submit button and then have this section. So let's start with the submit button. I'll close this again and come at the bottom here, and for this I'll create another div, and I'll give it a margin bottom of 4, and then for the type I'll give it a submit. Once someone clicks this, it submits the form. So I'll give it a py of 2, a px of 5, an inline block, a tracking wide for the text so it has a letter spacing, and then I'll give it a border. I'll align the content in the middle, so the vertical align, it'll be middle, and then I'll give it a duration of 500. This is for the transition. I'll give it a transition, and then I'll give it a text base, and then I'll center the text. I'll give it a bg of 600. So this transition that has a duration of 500 is when someone hovers on it, so it gives the person a bg of green 700 when they hover on the button. The border will be green 600. On hover, I also want to change the border to green 700. So I'll give it a text white, a rounded MD to have rounded corners, and then a W full to fill the whole container. So if I save this, go back to our code, you see, go back to our page, you see that I have a submit button here. Let's finalize everything by creating this section. So I'll go back to the code. So like always, let me close this and then add this. So for this, I'll give it a text center, and then I want for the first span to have a text slate of 400, and then a margin right of 2. I'll give it this text. If someone has forgotten or they don't have an account, then they can come here to the sign in button or the sign in link to take them to the sign in page. So I also create an a tag which has the text green 700. For the dark version, it has a text white, and then we'll give it a font semi-bold and then an inline block. This is the form that we're trying to create, and at the end of the day, we want it to look like this. So if someone clicks here, it will take them to the sign up page or the registration page. I've also created another tutorial that goes through the steps of creating a registration page, and at the end of the day, I also provide the code so you can check that video. It's also helpful. Otherwise, this is all I had for you in this video. But before I go, let's go back to the code and let me show you how you can easily switch to the dark version of the same login page. So I'll come at the top here and give it a class of dark. If I save this and then go back to the code, you see that now the dark version has applied. But since we are using Tailwind CSS, there is one thing we need to do. You need to come to your tailwind.config.js if you haven't done this already, and then you have to come and add this dark mode entry, and then you just add class to it so that you can easily switch the dark version to the light version depending on what class you've used. So in this case, since we have used a class of dark, then everything here will show the dark version of the page or the component. So that's it. That's all I had for you in this video. I hope to see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Otherwise, have a great time.